Welcome to Bloomberg Law. I'm Pacchia. We're taking a look at the Eurozone debt crisis today, and our guest is Buchheit. He's a partner at law firm Cleary, Gottlieb. Lee, of course, has spent the last 30 years advising national governments on their sovereign debt problems, and most recently, he engineered the restructuring deal that reduced Greece's national debt by hundreds of billions of euros. A Greek bondholder who accepted a 75% haircut on his investment described Buchheit as brilliant and brutal. Assuming we get more brilliance than brutality today, we're thrilled to have him join us. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks so much for coming back on the program. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So, this is an enormously complicated scenario we're looking at here. There's a lot of topics we could start off with, but I want to talk to you today about the whole concept of capital controls. We're seeing reports of a lot of people taking money out of Greek and Spanish banks and moving it either out of that banking system or out of that country. I would imagine this presents a real serious problem for the global banking system. Do you think we will eventually see state-imposed capital controls that would prevent people by force of law from removing their money from either the bank or the country they're in?
It's possible. The difficulty in Europe is that the treaty that established the European Union forbids it. And to date, the Europeans have said that they will not tolerate capital controls, and any country imposing capital controls automatically separates themselves from the monetary union. That's been the problem. Now, there was a report last week that the Europeans may be considering some relaxation of that. But you're quite right. The Achilles heel of the entire situation are these deposits. When a sovereign issues a bond, it doesn't have to worry about that bond until it matures, even if it trades down to 5 cents on the dollar. But the deposits you worry about Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. every single day, because they are completely liquid. They can move at any point. And all you have to see is a significant movement or rumors of a significant movement, and becomes a self-fulfilling process. Now, the traditional way of dealing with a bank run like that, is to declare bank holidays. And when the banks reopen, one or both of two things would happen. Either there would be capital controls. Argentina just imposed them, saying that you may not withdraw more than X dollars from or euros from your account in any given period.
Is that the primary type of capital control we're talking about? I realize this might be difficult to talk to an American audience about because we haven't seen them in the United States for 40 years. What other types of controls could feasibly come out of a situation such as we're seeing?
Capital controls that we all have seen in the last 10 or 15 years have been on the other side. They've been imposed by countries like Brazil and Chile and India, limiting the amount of money coming into an economy in order to filter out the hot money. Here we have exactly the opposite. Here we have capital controls designed to staunch the outflows of funds. It is relatively easy to do that in terms of wire transfers. So large transfers by multinationals and that sort of thing, that's relatively easy to do. What you will inevitably have, though, is people stuffing their euros in their socks and trying to walk across the border. You always do. Capital controls are porous, although you can stop the large outflows.
As I said before, we've been seeing reports of capital flight, but in your opinion, how bad is it? Is it approaching that point where someone's going to need to make a decision to impose these measures?
Well, there's an alternative. If you don't want to impose capital controls, and as I say, you either have to relax the treaty or break it to impose capital controls. The other way to do it would be to give an assurance to the depositors that there is no particular advantage in moving their money from Italy to Germany, for example. That would involve some form of European-wide deposit insurance framework, which I think is doable. But the moment you say you're going to insure depositors, you need to regulate the institutions that you've insured. So you're 2 steps down the road.
Those are two cumbersome options, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Amending the EU treaty or coming up with something analogous to an FDIC.
Exactly.
Which of the two do you think is more likely to come to bear?
The latter. I think if they can do anything within a reasonable time frame that would help this crisis, it would be to have an FDIC, a European-wide FDIC process, at least for systemically important institutions. But inevitably, that means you have to surrender a degree of supervisory control over those institutions to a central authority. But I think they could do that. And I think they could do that reasonably quickly. Now, at that point, of course, they would announce to all the depositors, you essentially have the entire European Union standing behind your deposit, so calm down and get out of the queue in front of the teller window.
That's an amazing step that Europe would take towards becoming a more consolidated union, something more analogous to the United States. It would be remarkable to see something like that come to bear.
Yes.
How do these decisions get made at the end of the day?
Well, in the end, you know, it's they require the consent of all of the members, or at least if there were to be a subgroup of them that said, we're going to set this up, which is possible, you would have to get the consent of the political leaders and the parliaments in all of these countries. They will, of course, see the camel's nose under the tent in this. They would say the moment we accept surrender of supervisory sovereignty over our financial institutions to Brussels, it's a step toward eventually surrendering fiscal sovereignty, which many advocate. But this is a step I think they could take reasonably quickly.
Yeah. It's amazing to talk about the implications of this on a theoretical level, but on a practical level, this must be a nightmare, say, for lawyers representing multinational companies that are doing business in Spain. You have these two options. One could result in serious capital controls. Multinationals' dollars or euros could be stuck in a given country, or you could see the European Union pull a rabbit out of a hat and come up with an FDIC-like solution. How do you plan on a contingency basis for something like this?
My impression is the multinationals have decided that they're not going to wait around and take the risk. So every night they'll sweep their balances out to someplace safe. I think it would be hard for a CEO of a multinational to say to its board and its shareholders, I was an optimist about Europe. I'm so sorry. You know, like Bob McNamara, I was wrong, terribly wrong. I don't think that's going to happen very much.
Let's talk about the next sovereign restructuring in Europe. Who's it going to be, and when is it going to happen?
My guess is it's probably Cyprus.
Really? Not Spain or Italy?
No, I think Cyprus first. I think they will. They've already signaled that they need a bailout. Now, Cyprus has borrowed money from Russia and China, and I think they continue to try to play that card against the Europeans. But at least the recent reports are that neither of those countries seems disposed to increase their exposure. That would lead them back to seeking a bailout. The sums involved are trivial in the scheme of things, 10 billion or euros or so. But the events in Greece this year, the debt restructuring to which the brutal debt restructuring to which you referred, hit Cyprus very hard because their banks had huge exposures to Greece.
Lee, you have such a fascinating view of what's happening on the ground as this crisis unfolds. I have to ask, where do you see this ultimately heading? Is the EU going to be able to survive what's currently happening?
My guess is yes. But it will take in the short run a great deal more money than they have thus far been prepared to set aside. Now, the history of this has been that they have repeatedly had to stare over the abyss and see how deep it is before they take any action. And the critics, of course, of Europe have been that it's always been too little, too late. But I think they're plenty scared. And it's just a question of putting significantly more resources than they have thus far.
Ballpark, how much are we talking about? I know it's hard to say. We're dealing with astronomical sums here.
They've put 500 billion euros aside. I would have thought €1 trillion, more like it.
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. Lee, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Thank you, Lee.
Please keep us up to date on developments as they occur.
Will do. Thank you.
That's Lee Buchheit, partner at Cleary Gottlieb. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can follow our updates on Twitter and see more of our videos on YouTube. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.